This video is to be used so you can review lines, distance, and midpoint because there is a pretest tomorrow. So first off, your slope-intercept form is your y equals mx plus b, where the m is our slope and the b is the y-intercept. And so some of the questions you're going to be asked is to just find what the slope and the y-intercept are. So you need to make sure you can solve for y first. If we solve this one for y, we would subtract our 6x over to the other side. Remember, they're not like terms, so you're going to leave it as 20, or I'm going to put my 6x first, plus my 20. Then we can divide everything by -4. And we reduce our fractions. That would be a positive, and it would be a 3/2. And this would be a -5. So there's your equation. I would like you now to fill in what is the slope and what is the y-intercept from that equation. Slope you should have done was a 3/2, since that comes from in front of your x. Your y-intercept then is the -5. Now we're also going to have you ask to find those items given the graph. So looking at number 2, we need to find the slope of the line that passes through those 2 points given. And the easiest way would be to count those coordinates. You want to create a right triangle following the grid lines, and then we can count the spaces of them. And if we count it, the rise is 4 and the run is 6. You might be wondering, why is it only 4? And if you look at the scale on your x and y axis, every 2 blocks is really 1, and the same is for your x as well. So notice this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and up and down then would be 1, 2, 3, 4. When we set up the fraction, we need to do our rise over the runs. That would be our 4 over the 6. And notice it is going downhill, so it's going to be a negative slope. When we reduce it, both of those can be divided by 2, so we get a -2/3 for our final slope. Now remember, you could use the slope formula of doing y minus y over x minus x. So if you like using your equation, you can do that instead. Next, we want to find the distance between those 2 given coordinates. Now remember, we can use Pythagorean theorem to do that, and that's what I'm going to do. So I already have my right triangle drawn. I have my A and my B is the 4 and the 6. So when we plug in our values, this is what we've got. So we have 16 plus 36 equals c squared. So c squared is going to equal, let's see, 16 plus 36 is 52. To undo the squared, remember we take the square root on both sides. But I want this to be the most simplified way of writing it in the exact answer. So we need to do our factor tree. I know 2 goes into there with a 26. My 26, again, I can do another 2, and that would be 13. 13 does not have any pairs, but I do have a pair of 2's. So remember, that goes on the outside, and this 13 stays inside. So you need to remember, you have to reduce it to make it so it's the exact answer. Lastly, for this graph, we need to find the midpoint. And we're going to use the actual coordinates themselves, so I'm going to plug in those values. For the x values, we have a -3 and a +3. For the 2 y values, we have a +3 and then a -1. When I combine these together, this gives me a 0 on top, and the y's gives me a 2 on top, so I have 0/2 and then 2/2. When I reduce that, or divide it, I get a 0 and then a 1 as my midpoint. So if I graph it, it ends up right there. And if you notice, it does look like it is the same distance between it, and it does fall along that line. In the pretest, you are going to be asked about vertical and horizontal lines, so you need to remember which is which. So with our y equals 4, I can rewrite that as a 0x plus 4. So my y-intercept to be at +4, my slope is 0, and this is a horizontal line. If my y equals 4 is a horizontal line, that means that my x equals -2 is the vertical line. So we need to go over to the x-axis at -2 and go directly straight up and down. Now one little hint I've said before is in the equation y equals 4, there's only a y value, and if you notice, my blue line over here only goes through the y-axis. So it works the same way if there's an x equals, and that's the only thing in your problem. Notice it only goes through your x-axis. The next two equations we are going to get into is to write the equation in slope-intercept form of a line that's perpendicular and a line that is parallel to in line, and it also has to go through a certain coordinate. So remember, we are going to be using point slope form to start out, and then we will distribute and solve for y. So the first thing you need to notice is what is the slope of the original line. So here's the original line, the slope is 1/3, and we want the line that's perpendicular. So the perpendicular slope has to be the opposite reciprocal. So that means that it needs to be the opposite sign. So the first one was negative, so this one needs to be, or the first one is positive, this one needs to be negative, and we need to do the reciprocal. So that means I need to flip it so it's over 3/1 instead, or just a -3. So this is the slope we're going to use, and we're going to use the coordinate 2, 4. So your x1 value is going to be the 2, your y1 value is your 4, and let's go ahead and plug in all three of those values. So this is the correct equation written in point slope form, but we want it in slope intercept form. Now remember, slope intercept form is your y equals mx plus b, so we need to distribute the -3 and solve for y. In other words, we need to move this 4 over by adding 4 onto both sides of your equation. Our final equation then is y equals -3x plus 10. For number 7 is going to be something similar, except we need to find the line that's parallel to this given line and going through this certain coordinate. So first off, what is the original slope of this line? And it is a 1/2. If it is parallel, they need to be the same slope. So it needs to stay a 1/2. So we're going to use the slope of 1/2 and our coordinate -6, 3. So that means our x1 is a -6, the y value is a 3, and now we can plug those 3 values into our equation right here. I want you now to tell me what should this equation be in point slope form with the correct values in the correct places. You should have filled in the y value was a 3, so y minus 3 is your left side. The slope is 1/2 still because we want it to be parallel. The x value is a -6, so in the end this becomes a +6 in your parentheses. So now we need to distribute the 1/2, so we get 1/2 x, half of 6 is 3, and then we need to move this 3 to the other side, so our -3 to the other side by adding 3. So we get a y equals 1/2 x plus 6 as our parallel line. This last one is just knowing that it's a trapezoid because we've seen trapezoids before now, and also just using the formulas on your formula chart. So your area of a trapezoid is 1/2 times h times b1 plus b2 in parentheses. So remember, we have 2 bases in a trapezoid. That would be the very bottom, so we're going to label that as b1, and our very top is our b2. The height then is the perpendicular height, so that would be this 4. And if you notice, we do not need the 5 or the 7 in our equation. So now we're just going to fill in all of the values. So our h is the height, that's 4. The base is my 8 plus the 6. To simplify this, we need to start in the parentheses first. This gives us 14. Then we still have it multiplied by 4 and a 1/2. So the easiest thing to do is to multiply just the first 2 together. So half of 4 is 2. And then I still need to multiply that by 14, so we get a 28. For the units, since there were not any units, we're going to write just units squared, and there's the area of our trapezoid.